We are back for another episode of the Mortgage Broker Podcast. I am Dean Lawton, one of the hosts, and flipping the script here a little bit as we have a bit of a different format for today's episode. Today we are bringing you live right from the Ascend Mortgage Summit 2025. This is our annual conference that we do at a Better Way Mortgage Group every year. It's a full day conference with some excellent speakers and a really engaging group session that we do throughout the day. The purpose of this episode is to focus on one key segment, which was a very enlightening interview with Jeff Admonson, who is the co-founder and chief commercial officer at Neo Financial, one of our brokerage's preferred lender partners, and has become a really strong partner within our group, a lender that's really getting ahead of things, especially when it comes to open banking and just their philosophy in general and how they approach the financial space. This is one of Canada's fastest growing fintech companies, and Jeff Admonson brings a really interesting perspective to business in general. He also is the co-founder of SkipTheDishes, as many of you would know, a game changer in the food delivery industry. He's also a former national team wrestler, and he's really just brought a competitive spirit to the world of entrepreneurship. And, we had the opportunity to sit on stage with him and myself as a fireside chat to really just get into everything around, the competitive mindset of an athlete and an entrepreneur, how that's translated into his career when it comes to his success with SkipTheDishes, and now how he's folded that into Neo Financial. This was, again, a very enlightening conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of. It was a pleasure sitting down with Jeff. So I'll pass it off to stage, and here we go. Welcome to the Mortgage Broker Podcast, tailor-made for Canadian mortgage industry professionals. Proudly presented by a Better Way Mortgage Group, this podcast is your trusted source for insider insights, market updates, and strategies to elevate your career in the ever-evolving world of mortgage brokering. Whether you're a seasoned broker with a Better Way Mortgage Group or an industry enthusiast looking to stay ahead, our episodes are designed to empower you with the knowledge and tools you need to excel in the Canadian mortgage space. Jeff, thank you and welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Although I'm a little bit disappointed. I was expecting, because we were in a helicopter hangar, I brought a harness. I was expecting to be rappelled in from the ceiling. That's not going to happen, although I have been promised a helicopter ride at some point. That's going to happen, so I'm excited for that as well.
That's a good point to bring up. We will be back here in August, and we will be getting all of us up in the helicopters, so you can look out for that. Let's
That's
just
a real thing. You weren't even joking?
No, we're serious. Yeah. So Jeff, you've competed at the highest level, in your wrestling career. You co-founded 2 successful companies. Maybe you can just share some of your experience as a national team athlete and how that's influenced your approach to entrepreneurship, especially from a risk-taking and resilience perspective.
Yeah, well, and first I want to thank everyone for letting me be here. When I was asked about the opportunity to come speak, and I learned a little bit about the organization, the opportunity to come out and connect with other entrepreneurs, to me, that's just such an amazing opportunity for me personally. Entrepreneurs are really what's driving this country forward. I feel a lot of a kindred spirit with entrepreneurs, because in terms of relating what a lot of people are going through, and really kind of across all these different types of businesses, a lot of the things that entrepreneurs are doing are very, very similar. I actually want to start out, before I touch on my career as an athlete. It was actually my first experience with a mortgage broker, and actually how this experience made SkipTheDishes and Neo possible. And I'm not even joking. I had just graduated from university, fully broke, almost unemployed, and my hometown, Saskatoon, where I grew up, was going through a bit of a housing boom. And I couldn't afford to buy a house, but I was able to scrape together enough money to buy it, like literally a piece of land, a lot. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about financing. And I was able to connect with a mortgage broker who helped me get my first builder's mortgage. I didn't know really what that meant, but all I knew was that it was going to be given to me in tranches. The money from the bank would get kind of given to me as I was building the house. And I literally had to build the house, get it to lock up, and then get that first tranche of payment, go out and pay all the contractors. I ended up finishing this house, and I ended up selling it later. And because of the gain that I was able to make on that property when I was like 24, 25 years old, that was what enabled me to have a little bit of some savings, so that when I had the opportunity to start Skip the Dishes, I was able to actually take that risk and go. Actually, went like 2.5, 3 years without paying myself a salary, just basically paying myself out of the savings that I had gotten from this property. And that probably would never have happened if I hadn't met a great mortgage broker who educated me on the process and really held my hand and walked me through it. And so I've got a ton of respect for that. And I sincerely mean that if I hadn't have been able to go so long without paying myself, I don't think Skip would have made it. And if Skip wouldn't have made it, then Neo wouldn't exist either. So I've got a lot of appreciation for what they've done.
That's a cool story. Yeah, it's amazing what what equity in a home and can do for you outside of just that home, and how you leverage that to to build your business and where you are today. It's pretty cool. Yeah, maybe maybe you can kind of share some insights on how your before buying that home, your wrestling career, what got what drove you, and the discipline and resilience that you had from that.
Yeah, and so wrestling's not exactly an extremely popular sport in Canada. I don't think anyone here is like recreationally playing wrestling in the evenings and weekends. Maybe I'm wrong. There's some fit people here. But for those that aren't as familiar, wrestling is a sport where you need to have, and just for context, the speed of a kind of a 400-meter sprinter, the endurance of a long-distance runner to be able to compete in an all-day event. You need to have the explosive power of a power lifter to be able to lift someone your size off their feet while they're fighting against you. You also have over 600 named techniques, and then an infinite number of variations between those different techniques. And then on top of that, it's one of the most competitive sports in the world. There's 185 countries that compete in it. It's one of the most diverse in terms of medal counts at the Olympics and the World Championships. Like, there's different countries winning all the time. It's the national team sport for over a dozen countries on almost all the continents. And so it's definitely like a quite a challenging sport. There's also no off season as well. There's no winter or summer. It's all year round. It's worldwide. That was the sport that I fell in love with, and I probably would have. Looking back, I'm really thankful for how difficult that sport is, because and one of the quotes that really stuck with me was this quote from Dan Gable. He's an American wrestler, and he said, "Once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy." And that really stuck with me, because having gone through everything I've gone through in wrestling, I'm a 10-time national champion, Pan Am Games medalist. I got to go to the Olympics. It was so difficult going through that by the time I was thinking about what was next in my career, I was thinking there's no way it could be harder than what I've already kind of had to go through just to kind of get to the start of my career. And one story that kind of sticks out is I was actually at the Olympics, and I was sitting there. One of my teammates was getting ready for the bronze medal match. His name was Matt Gentry, and he was up against this incredibly, intimidating Russian wrestler. And I looked over at him, and I was like, "Matt, like, are you okay?" Like, he was almost like he'd seen a ghost. He was just kind of staring off into the distance, and he actually seemed incredibly relaxed. And I was a little bit worried, because he's going to the biggest match of his life. And he actually turned to me and he said, "You know what? I'm exactly where I want to be." And he said, because going out into that match, the most important things aren't going to change, whether he wins or loses. So you can imagine, like, he trained 20, 25 years for this. And he's able to take a step back and say that it doesn't really matter whether he wins or loses, to take all of that pressure off of himself, because he had such good perspective on the things that were actually important. The two things that he mentioned to me that were the most important were his health and happiness. Those are the two things. And he said, okay, well, in health, if I go out there, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to really get seriously hurt. So that's not really even a risk at all. And then number two, he says, the people who I really care about, the people who I love and who love me, aren't going to love me any more or less, regardless of the outcome. And so that's how he was able to reframe risk taking. And that really, really stuck with me. And in fact, after the Olympics, I was coming back home and I was given the opportunity. I reconnected with some of my friends from university. They were track athletes. And they were talking about this idea of starting a company, and we were kind of looking at different business models. And it was, I kind of thought back to that moment at the Olympics, my own career in terms of my own risk taking, and this idea of like, okay, hey, should I quit, a fairly successful job, like it pays well, it's comfortable, to start a company? And I was like, well, what is the worst that's going to happen? Like, my life's not in danger. And plus, whether my company succeeds or fails, I don't think anyone who I really care about closely is really going to care either way. I don't think they're going to love me any more or less. And so to me, it really took away that fear of failure that I think a lot of us have, certainly I have, because being able to put the things that were important in perspective. So that was just one of the examples of the things that really stuck with me in terms of, as I was thinking about transitioning from being, a high performance athlete to starting a company.
That's a good example of just like the fear, to kind of put that in perspective for a mortgage broker, like the fear to scale maybe higher and take your business to the next level. How did that carry into you building and scaling Skip?
Yeah, I think that, and even when I think about the competitions that I didn't win, and obviously those are the ones that really stick with you. And in particular, I remember one, it was actually in Finland, and I ended up losing to someone from Poland. And it was a devastating loss. It was really, really painful for me. And when I looked back at, kind of reflected on, why didn't I get the outcome that I wanted? And it wasn't that I wasn't prepared. It wasn't that I wasn't capable or talented enough. It really came down to risk taking. It really came down to not having that confidence and that belief, and thinking about failure before I even started. And so it was really kind of at that moment, after that match that I lost, that I basically made a promise that I was never going to let fear of failing ever stop me from pursuing the thing that I'm working on, or what my dreams were. And because even if it doesn't work out, it's actually not that bad. And frankly, the risks, especially in Canada, like if you go for it hard, I know that those are the people who I respect the most, the people who are actually in the arena, the ones that are making these big bets. And frankly, like there's a lot of people who make big bets. Some of them don't work out, but they still gain that respect. They still, and I think you kind of all know people who are out there getting after it, making bets. And if they don't work out, I still think that we still look at those people and say, those people are incredible. They're actually trying to move this country, this province, this city. They're trying to move it forward, versus a lot of, the vast majority are never going to take any of those risks at all. So to me, I'm in favor of people, and I admire people who are actually doing things that carry, some amount of risk for it.
Just given the competitive nature of your athletic career, and like you mentioned, one of the most competitive sports in the world, how did you harness that competitive mindset in business, and what would be your advice to mortgage brokers or entrepreneurs to also harness that competitive mindset?
Yeah, when it comes to like the mindset side, and even becoming a competitive person, I think it's hard to just look for hacks. And I hope, by the way, even as I'm talking today, I hope this is the intent of me coming here and chatting is not for this to be a, life hacks. And there's the internet is full of, hustlers and people who will have these like 5 things that you can do to make $1 million. I don't have any of those things. I have all the like hard, old fashioned fundamental things that I think everyone knows. And then I've got a handful of stories of how I've maybe applied them. But in terms of competition, you can't just snap your fingers and become a competitive person. To me, it comes down to your own identity as an individual. And if you think about like, okay, well, what makes someone competitive? Like, why would they even be competitive at all? And I think it really comes down to what is the thing that they want more than anything else? And who is going to be with them and helping them get it, or who's going to be trying to take it away from them? And in wrestling, it's very clear. The rules are well established. Hey, I want to be a national champion, a world champion, an Olympic champion. Okay, obviously I can't do that by myself. I need coaches and trainers and teammates. And then there's other people, my competitors, who have that same goal and are trying to take that away from me. But I feel like outside of sport, it's so much more gray. It's so much more vague. There's no well-established set of rules about how to become a champion. And so I think for a lot of us, we just don't end up getting around to saying like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be the absolute best? And I think once you've established what you want that to be, and it can be anything, then it comes down to, okay, well, what am I willing to do to get it? And basically looking around and saying like, okay, well, I'm not going to let anyone stop me. I'm going to be obsessed with achieving the thing that I want. And I'm going to build a team, and I'm going to study my competition and find out what are the ways that I need to win. What are the rules of the game? And I think that if you have that personal attachment to that identity, to whatever goal that it is that you set, then all of a sudden you start becoming competitive. When winning really, really matters, you start really becoming competitive. When losing is incredibly painful, you start becoming competitive. And I think that when you think about the competitive side of it, it really comes down to what are those big bets that you're making? And then how do they tie into who you are as an individual? And for me personally, it was about becoming a national world Olympic champion and then getting after that. And I remember actually like there was a point where I was so competitive leading up to the Olympic trials. It was actually in Winnipeg, Manitoba. There was a Russian who had came to Canada, and we weren't sure if he was going to get citizenship or not. I cared so much about winning that literally from the moment I opened my eyes, I was thinking about beating him. It was the first thing on my mind every single day. I'm not recommending that for anyone. I mean, I'm just saying that help happened on its own. I didn't have to consciously go out and like, open up my diary and it's like, okay, hey, write my note about my Russian competitor who I'm going to wrestle today. It was just, I wanted to win so badly. And this was someone who I clearly knew was going to be in my way. And I didn't, not like the guy. He ended up testing positive for steroids, so maybe I shouldn't have liked him, but it was just, it happened organically because of the competitiveness that came in and because I wanted something so badly. And so to me, I rarely see it outside of sport. I sometimes see it though. I see it in entrepreneurs who are borderline obsessed with becoming something. And it could be, the top brokerage in the country. It could be, to doing, 100 million in sales. It doesn't matter what it is. And I love it when I see it because you just know that person is going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, it definitely, the competitive, desire to win will harness the focus to get there. And, how like when you think of that and like just your incredible focus and adaptability under pressure, how did these qualities help you, pivot from, being so focused on wrestling and being the national champ to then, you want to get into the food delivery business? Like, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, well, I think that when when I think about the things that as an athlete and as I was thinking about, okay, well, what do I do next? To me, it just seemed like such a waste to not take all these things that I had spent 20 years, 25 years um, building. And it was not like you could argue that at the end of my athletic career, I had nothing to show for it. I had no money. I had debt. I had, tons of injuries. Um, I had no like tangible net worth of which to speak of. Um, but the thing that I had built up was really this, I call it like character capital. And it was this, the resilience of having been through everything that I'd been through. It was this comfort with discomfort, being able to, push myself to the absolute limit of what I was physically, mentally, and spiritually capable of doing. And then it came down to, well, where is this other canvas that I can apply it to? And it seemed to me, and I had worked in a corporate job, and it seemed to me that there was no one really that had the same mindset. It was very uncommon to find people who really cared about winning as badly as I did. And again, you're probably thinking like, okay, Jeff, this guy is a borderline psychopath about winning. Maybe, but it was more about like, well, what is the point? Like, why does winning even matter? And I think I cared a lot more about my own community and about putting my community on the map, than I did about like winning in the sense of making money. And so when I was thinking about what to do next, it was really around, okay, well, how do I actually make what I do matter? How do I have an impact? How do I apply what I've learned? And this idea that we had at Skip the Dishes was really around, okay, well, how can we put Saskatchewan and Manitoba and even Canada on the map? No one was building tech companies. In 2012 is when we started up. No one was doing tech companies in Canada. Everyone who wanted to work in technology was moving to San Francisco, New York, Boston, Seattle, London, Berlin. In fact, I didn't even know what the word startup meant. When my co-founders came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do a startup," I actually had asked them, "What is a startup?" That's really like literally how clueless I was. But the idea that we could build something where we were able to give the people who had ambition, who had the work ethic and the skills, and instead of them having to move to San Francisco, we could say, actually, you can do the thing that you want to do, and you can do it here. We can create these opportunities here for those people, and that to me was really cool. That to me was something I was like, succeed or fail, being able to create a company that can keep hardworking, talented people in Canada was something I felt like would be worth putting my blood, sweat, and tears into. And even if, and I literally have an email that I sent to my co-founders when we all kind of agreed to go all in on it. And there was only really two things that I wanted to get out of the experience. The first was I wanted to learn. I just wanted to be able to learn about business. I had no formal business education. I had a science degree that was borderline useless. So I just wanted to learn about business. And then number two, I wanted to build relationships with really smart people, people who I love being around. And again, I was not wise as a 27-year-old, 28-year-old when we started the company. This is just the things that I felt like, regardless of whether we succeed, I feel like I can succeed in those two things, regardless of how the company does. And fortunately, with a lot of hard work, good luck, great timing, good people, we're able to build Skip that to the point when I left, we were doing about 4 billion in sales in about 4.5 years, which we can get into is also incredibly painful. Like getting business is painful. Keeping up with runaway business is also incredibly painful. It actually never gets any easier.
It's an incredible transition, from sports to tech, and just like, it's really reinventing yourself in a completely different arena. You had a clear why, but like, did you have a tech background in any regard, or did you have like, where did that side of it come from?
Well, I think that's and Ryan's in the audience here too, and like most of the people who work at Neo or work at Skip, I don't think there is a tech person really. Like it's to me, it's more of a mindset. It's more of how do you operate. It's more of what are your goals, what kind of person are you, than did you work at Google or did you work at Facebook? Skip was built with people, our best people. I'll give you one example. Our top product manager was stocking bookshelves at Chapters when we met him. But just a smart guy, good sense of humor, hardworking, really, really cared about winning, ended up becoming one of the top product managers in Canada within 4 years. No secret sauce, no superhuman ability. Most of the people, this is their first time working in a tech company. They've never done it before. Um, and that can be an adjustment for a lot of people because there are differences in terms of the pace. We grew in the last 3 years at Neo 155,000% revenue growth. And so that's an adjustment for a lot of people in terms of being around that pace and that speed and some of the chaos and also the building aspect. Like there's a really big difference between operating and building. As a lot of you know, if you're building a business, it's super, super hard in the early days. That's the same as us. The difference though is that stage may last for a decade because the market is actually just so big and you're trying to capture a large part of the market. But like a lot of the times, if you're hiring someone and they've come from a big tech company, it actually may not even work because they're going to be so beholden and they're going to be so attached to the ways of operating, at a totally different company at a different stage than what we're at. So for us, like we would rather find someone who's, built their own company or, has been in a high growth company rather than someone who just came from a, traditional tech company.
That's actually really interesting. Makes a lot of sense. And if you look at the two companies you've started with, Neo and Skip, they're very much disruptors in their space. And maybe you can share just some of the biggest similarities and differences in building Skip versus Neo.
Yeah, like the things that are similar. There's actually a shocking amount of similarities between almost any companies. That even between a brokerage, a bank, a food delivery company. Because when you go down to the very fundamentals of like what do customers actually want, those are pretty universal truths, and those usually boil down to saving time and money. That's usually what people care about the most. Those are the two things. And if you can help solve those for customers in any business, you're going to be rich. Like that's what it comes down to. And so for Skip, it started out. We started really thinking about food delivery, but then we actually thought about, well, actually what we're doing is we're saving people time. And then we thought, well, food delivery actually can be kind of expensive. How do we save people money as well? And so we started really obsessing about, okay, well, how do we make sure that we have the most selection, so the most convenience, save people time, and then the other side of it was how do we drive prices down? And while I was there at Skip, we had a rule that we would never work with a restaurant that saw us as costing them money. And that was really important because if an owner looked at what we were doing and said, hey, Skip is actually an expense, not a profit center, they would see every order that we sent them as costing them money, not making them money. And so we actually turned away a lot of businesses because they fundamentally didn't get the model, or we didn't do a good enough job explaining the model, because we needed to be able to drive the cost of food delivery down. And at Neo, it's the same thing where, no one really cares about a bank. No one really cares. I hope I'm not making too many enemies, but no one really cares about a mortgage. They want to buy a house. When it comes to banking, no one's opening up their banking app and bragging to their friends about the color of it and how great it works. They just want to be able to buy things. They want to be able to get credit. They want to be able to invest money. The bank and is really just the way that you do that. So for us, it's really about how do we actually make it as easy as possible. Our mission is really just to make banking user friendly. That's very basic. And how do we offer the highest possible yield at the lowest possible cost? And then get out of the way and make it as frictionless as possible. And we don't try to presume that anyone's going to really love us. It's more about letting them do the things that they want to do. And so for Skip, it was like, no one really cares about Skip. They care about getting their favorite pad thai delivered to them as quickly as possible so that they can save the time that they would have spent cooking to do the things that they want to do. So I think it's kind of, for us, it was more reframing and, getting our ego out of it and trying to just focus on like, what are the fundamental things that the customer is actually trying to do? And then building around that, which is actually harder to do than you think, because a lot of us we really like the companies that we were building. So we have to remind ourselves that the customer only wants to do the thing. They only want to solve the problem that they want to solve. And your brand and all these things around it are just ways of generating that trust and awareness around it. But it really is about the problem that you're solving for the customer. And that's universal across companies.
Is there a specific example of a shared strategy that worked with Skip and both with Neo?
Yeah, when we started, so Skip started, and we were trying to, we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't even paying ourselves. And this is maybe one thing that you probably hear this a lot. People say that hey, you're a mortgage broker, or you have your own company, and so they assume that you're rich. They assume it was easy. I get that a lot too. People assume that Skip kind of just happened overnight. We literally were maxed out our credit cards, ordering to restaurants, because we were getting no customers. No one was ordering. And so we were kind of like faking the order. So we would like order from the restaurant, and then we'd call them and be like, oh, look, you got an order. And it was like literally my engineers that were doing it. Fake it till you make it, I guess. And it was like that for a while. Like, it was dire for a long time. And we had to figure out how to acquire customers. And so we came up with this strategy. It was kind of like a B to B to C strategy. So we couldn't pay to acquire customers. We couldn't pay for marketing. In fact, I ran our marketing, which was basically just like cat photos on Facebook. It was really, really bad. And so we actually talked to the restaurants, and we said, hey, how can we work with the restaurants so that the restaurants actually acquire the customers for us? And that really came back to it forced us to have to make sure that every restaurant that we worked with saw Skip as a way to make more money. And frankly, if you're running a restaurant that makes $1 million a year maybe, and you can do an extra $100,000 in food delivery, on top of, like, once you paid off your fixed costs, like, it actually is very, very profitable business. And so then the restaurants ended up actually pushing Skip to their own customers and doing the acquisition for us, which was super important because we were competing against DoorDash and Uber, and they had the most powerful investors in the world. In fact, the day that Skip, we were so broke that we actually ended up applying to enter this business contest at the University of Saskatchewan. The grand prize was 50 grand, and we're so desperate for revenue and to pay for our bills. We ended up entering this business contest. The day of that business contest, which we ended up losing to a company that made horse hammocks. In my own hometown, our competitors, DoorDash, raised a $70 million round of investment from the biggest, most powerful investor in the world, Sequoia. Then within a year of that, Uber launched Uber Eats. Their first global market was actually Toronto. And so it was extremely dire. So we ended up having to put our heads together and come up with this B to B to C strategy. And because our competitors had so much money, they would just throw money at the problem. They would just pay for marketing. But we ended up getting this growth engine going. And it ended up actually making it so that about 80% of our customers came to us for free, organically. And it created this super, super powerful flywheel network effect. And as we were thinking about Neo, we were actually shocked again because it cost the banks between $750 and $1,000 per customer to acquire a customer in Canada. Like, that's crazy to think that literally 1,000 customers at a bank is going to cost about $1 million in marketing dollars. That's how much the banks are spending. Now think of that as a barrier that is to start a company where you're literally going to be wasting all of your money on just marketing. And to get to 1,000 customer company, you're going to spend $1 million. So we ended up partnering up with other brands like Tim Hortons, Cathay Pacific, Junior Achievement is a partner. There's a few others that are in the pipeline right now. And they actually acquire a lot of the customers for us. And then we spend a lot of time focusing on organic and referrals and how can we get customers to refer one another. But taking that strategy, we were able to take our acquisition costs from about $750 a customer down to below 100. So we're able to do that, and then we're able to service those customers because we're fully digital at about 1% of the cost of a traditional bank. And then with the savings, then we focus on transferring those into the customers in the form of higher yield products, more self-serve, so that they don't need to be calling it or anything like that.
Wow, that's incredible. Hey everyone, Dean here. Quick timeout from the episode to share with you the ABW Tuesday Mortgage Memo, your weekly market highlights sent directly to your inbox every Tuesday. This is certainly one you're not going to want to miss, so make sure to sign up now. You can do so with a link in the show notes, or you can head to joinabw.ca and sign up there. This is a high-level summary of market developments, regulatory updates, and housing trends every Tuesday. So hope you enjoy it, and back to the show. What are some of the toughest challenges that you face as a serial founder, and how did your previous experiences help you navigate those with when launching Neo?
Oh yeah, like and you guys will get this, like there's just so many things that go wrong all the time. I remember we were launching Vancouver as a market for Skip, and I was staying in Burnaby, and I remember our CFO, like a CFO in quotation marks, he was just like a very mid-level finance guy, ended up booking an Airbnb for me. And I remember getting to the Airbnb, and it was kind of like one of these things where it was like a neighborhood where you like lock your doors when you go into it. And they like knock on the door kind of falls off. And this guy opens the door, he's really pissed. He's not happy to see me at all. And I'm like, hey, I'm here to stay this Airbnb. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, follow me. Takes me downstairs. I think I'm going to get murdered in the basement. Like I could already see the headlines. And the Airbnb I was staying in, it was like the kitchen was also combined with the furnace room. It was a really interesting creative design. The architect had a good time with it. And I remember I had to fly back, and I flew back to Vancouver. And when I took off, it was kind of, you're checking your phone a little bit. And when I landed, my phone had 500 missed calls. I think it was a Calgary to Vancouver flight, so an hour and a half, 500 missed calls. What happened was there was an outage. Google had changed something with their API and had completely taken our website down. And so what had happened actually was the couriers, there was maybe like a couple thousand orders that were kind of in transit at the time. We weren't that big at that time. But what happened was the couriers no longer knew the destinations of any of the food for thousands of customers. And I don't know if you've ever had a grown man cry to you on the phone before, but like taking the customer service call. So I basically like logged on and started like fielding customer service calls, and literally had, grown men whose pizza was going to be 20 minutes late, fully breaking down on me. I had one guy tell me to take the pizza and shove it up my. So there's things like that happen that break, and I think that those are, really, really painful. I remember another time we were, our operations center, it was at the call center, and like the servers were melting down at like 1,000 orders a day. I remember like there was people on the team crying. because there were so many calls coming in, and they were having to manually like click and move windows, and like no one had any training at all. There was like a guy who was like a profuse. He was a sweater, and he would literally be like sweating, dripping down like onto the keyboard. It was a real sweatshop. And I think we broke like 1,000 orders that day. And I remember my co-founder came over to me and he was like, that was pretty intense. And I was like, yeah. And then he says, imagine what it's going to be like when we do 100,000 orders in a day. 100,000 orders in a day. And I was like, almost everyone quit just doing 1,000 orders a day. How are we going to do 100 times the volume? And literally the month I left Skip, we did well over 2 million orders in a month. And not a sound. No one was stressed out. People had their feet up. And that is the power that technology has to be able to help things scale. It's absolutely phenomenal. But like the harder part is actually more on the people side, I'd say. Like it's because you can do almost anything if you have great people around you that are with you kind of on that journey. And we've been really fortunate to have such exceptional people commit themselves to our mission. But the painful part is when they lose the faith. And that happens, I think, to all of us. And that's happened to us as well. And it's really around, how do you make sure that you're working with people? How do you make sure that they're connected to the mission? How do you make sure that they have the right connection to the business? You're not shielding them from everything, but you're also not, dumping everything on them. So to me, like when I think about the most painful pieces of the journey, it's always centered around the people and making sure that, we're doing whatever we can to take care of people, finding the right people, also wishing people well too. If there's a part in their life where their life changes and they want something different, wishing those people well. But to me, it's always tough because I'm such a team person. I care so much about the people who I work with. It's always tough for me whenever we lose someone.
Just thinking of SkipTheDishes and you essentially transformed the food delivery business by leveraging technology. And you just mentioned just how incredible, and powerful it can be, especially, 2 million orders a month. How did that experience scaling SkipTheDishes, like the tech infrastructure, how did that influence what you're doing at Neo Financial and just your approach to building a digital bank first?
Yeah, I think the part of the lesson that we took from Skip, like before Skip, there was actually hundreds of food delivery companies, small. I've been inside some of the operations. Like it's almost like a bingo hall from the 90s. A lot of them. It was like you walk in, everyone's smoking. There's a haze in the room, and there's a bunch of like people on phones. And so we basically introduced technology to an industry that had just kind of fallen behind the times. It wasn't rocket science what we were doing. We weren't rocket scientists. Like I said, it was ordinary people. And with banking, when we looked at it, it was really interesting because there were similarities that we saw between industries that had kind of fallen behind the times a little bit. And in banking, I guess how many people here are from Canada originally? Like how many people are like born in Canada, grew up in Canada? Okay, so it's about half of the audience. What I hear from people who come to Canada, maybe they grew up somewhere else, they come to Canada. I love hearing these stories. My wife is actually from Ukraine. What they often say was that they love Canada. It's a great country, great people. The second thing they say is medieval banking system. And it's kind of shocking to me and again, I grew up in Canada, so I know nothing else other than the banks that we have in Canada. But if you've actually banked anywhere else in the world, if you've banked in Brazil or China or Europe, you know that the banks are much more advanced in other countries. And it seems odd to me that you have a country where we're top 5 in the world in education, we're top 5 in the world in smartphone usage and internet usage, yet we are in the bottom 5 of the developed world in digital banking. And so as an entrepreneur, you kind of ask yourself, well, why is that? Why is it that way? And it's because we've just prioritized stability over progress for hundreds of years. Like, banks in Canada are literally older than Confederation. And it's not to say that they're bad. They're amazing if you're an investor in a bank. I mean, they have 5 times the profit of any other banking system globally. They literally have domestic ROEs in excess of 35% compared to 7 to 8% in the US. So they're incredibly profitable. We're paying double the fees for the exact same products and services that you'd get in any other country. And so imagine if this were any other industry, if you were buying a car and a Toyota RAV4, I mean, maybe this will come true with tariffs, who knows? But imagine if a RAV4 is twice the price in Canada as it is in the US. Or if ordinary products were twice the price in Canada as they were in the US, people would be outraged. But for some reason, we've kind of accepted this in banking. You know, the average Canadian's paying $400 to $500 per year in non-interest fees. These are overdraft, monthly fees, NSF fees. And these fees then subsidize the wealthy, and then the wealthy subsidize institutional lending, and then institutional lending actually subsidizes international expansion for the banks. So to me, it was an industry where it was like, there's some wrongs that should be righted here. There are some systemic problems that I think that no one has just stepped up and tried to tackle. Like, no one's built a bank from scratch. And that the strategy, when we thought about, well, if we really want to make a go at this and build a different banking system, a banking system that's more fair, that's modern, that's faster, we cannot build it on top of the same old legacy systems that the banking system is built on today. So like Skip, where we built everything from scratch, we've had to do that at Neo as well, in order so that we're not beholden to the same dependencies that limit the big 5 banks today. And so that means that we've built our own core banking system, our own ledger, our own in-house processing, our own issuing capabilities and underwriting and AI tools. Those are all completely controlled by us, which really gives us a huge advantage long-term, because we can actually deploy 100 times faster than a traditional bank.
That's incredible. Like, how important is data-driven decisions when you're looking to, scale to the next level or make any sort of change within, any of these 2 businesses that you've founded?
It's super important, but data becomes more important when you have way more scale. I think a lot of people are looking for the data early on, and I'd say that you have to trust your gut a lot more early on, and intuition, and the things that you know to be true, that you don't need data to back up. Once you start scaling, though, then of course data becomes far, far more important. And that's where I think there's a huge amount of opportunity right now, where you've got open banking, you've got real-time rails, you've got AI. Like, this literally might be the perfect storm for advisors and brokers, because you've got this convergence of renewals that are coming, it's like a giant avalanche that's happening. You've got open banking that's about to hit, but we're kind of pre the impacts of AI as well. And I think that the opportunity that these things all have, like the amount of advice and guidance that I think Canadians are going to need over the next 5 years, I don't know if there's ever been a time where they've needed more handholding than they do now. And I think that actually positions brokers in a unique spot. Now, I think that there's going to have to be a very quick adoption, though, of AI within the broker space. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in terms of how that's leveraged on behalf of the customer. And where is it going to fall? Is it going to fall within the hands of customers, or is it going to be a tool that's going to 100x the efficiency of a broker? And so it's likely going to be a combination of both.
Yeah, I mean, like open banking, it's a hot topic in the Canadian financial services space, and I know that's a big focus for Neo. And what is your perspective on open banking, and how do you see it impacting consumers, mortgage brokers, and just the broader financial ecosystem?
Who here has heard of open banking before? Just maybe a quick show of hands. So there is still a very, very low penetration of what open banking actually is. Um, who here remembers when you had to change your phone number when you changed providers? You guys remember those days where it was like you had to like text everybody and it's like, here's my new number? Well, the government actually stepped in and said, hey, like customers can own their number. And it actually just made switching so much easier. You could switch providers. And actually, I switched recently. I was actually shocked at how easy it is compared to back in the day when you had to like text everyone and upload all your contacts. Open banking is kind of the same thing. What it's going to do is it's going to give customers ownership of all of their banking data. So what that means is that the competition is going to get ramped up big time. So that means that a customer is going to be able to move from bank to bank, mortgage to mortgage a lot easier. It's shifting the control from a bank to the customer. It's already happened in every other G7 nation with the exception of Canada. It's been something that's supposed to happen actually for the last 7 years and is now starting to happen in Canada. It should be hitting within the next 24 months. And what that's going to do is essentially make it easier for customers to shop around. It's going to make it easier for customers to switch. So basically, it's kind of like click a button and all of a sudden your mortgage is now with someone else. Or click a button and all of a sudden all of your bills and expenses have been ported over to another bank because that data now sits within the customer and not within the bank.
That's super interesting. So it's like similar to like a broker using a CRM and having multiple technologies tapped into that through some sort of an API, and just like the flip of a switch, you're switching like again payments, like you mentioned, like maybe just going a little deeper there. Like how is it so easy to make those switches, especially when it comes to a mortgage?
Well, it's more like if you're on Salesforce today and you wanted to move over to HubSpot, that's kind of because you own the data that you have in Salesforce. That's yours, and you can migrate it over into another CRM if you wanted to. Right now, you can't do that as a customer. If I'm a customer and I bank with Scotiabank, I can't migrate my data from Scotiabank over to RBC or to Neo. So that's the difference. It's really enabling that ownership of the data to the customer. And that's why it's going to make it easier for them to be able to say, okay, hey, I was doing this. So for example, if I apply for a mortgage with Neo or with Scotia or RBC, it's going to make it easier for me to say, hey, I had a mortgage here. I just want to hit an easy button and move it all over to over here. And there's no paperwork. It's literally like a few clicks. That's kind of going to be possible within the next 24 months with open banking.
How do you see that? How do you see open banking empowering brokers to provide a better service and let's say more tailored solutions for their clients?
Well, it's going to give, if the customer wants it, it's going to give the ability for the brokers to have access to a lot more data. So user permissioned data. So if you are offering, if a customer comes to you, they can now come to you with a whole host of data that you previously would not have had access to. That could be cash flow data. It could be rent history data. It could be utility data. Anything that's going to help give a truer sense of who this person is. And ultimately, that's what the banks struggle with in a lot of ways, is trying to understand who should I give $1 million mortgage to and what should I price that at and who is going to default on that mortgage. And it's the underwriting aspect is an exercise in data. And so if you can come to them and say, hey, listen, we actually have this humongous picture of this customer that shows that the customer is actually so much more creditworthy than that narrow view that we had in the past, which kind of relied primarily on credit bureau data, and just whatever data that bank happened to have. If you can come with a bigger picture now, and if that customer can come with that picture because they own that data, I think you're going to see a lot more personalization happening that the mortgage brokers are going to be able to offer. It's going to be more customized and tailored service for them, and I think you're going to be able to approve more people, and then hopefully some of the bad guys will get kind of filtered out, because the more of a picture you get of those people, the more you're going to understand, well, maybe I shouldn't perhaps underwrite that person.
What barriers do you see in adoption of open banking in Canada, and what role do you think fintechs, traditional banks, regulators, like how would they play in moving this forward?
I think there's a very established interest in keeping things exactly the way they are. I think that is the biggest challenge, is that the incumbents gained very little from changing anything whatsoever. Like I said, why are we bottom 5 in the world in digital banking when we have such a great country? Because it makes no sense at all for the banks to change it. They're just making too much money. So they don't want to change things. And the government is also afraid of the banks because, for context, there's been political leaders that have been brought to power by the dairy lobby. Imagine what the bank lobby can do.
Yeah.
So there is a fear of pissing off the banks because they're extremely powerful. These are I think it's like 5 of the top 8 largest companies in Canada are banks. And they're global companies too. And so there is a strong established interest. Just don't change anything, keep it the same. And we just had an election. Did anyone hear anything about competition, bank reform, financial system modernization? So I think the problem is that it's this kind of nascent friction that exists in everything that we do that is kind of invisible. For example, moving money between institutions takes between 5 and 7 days. Like, I can walk money back to my hometown quicker than I can transfer it. And it's literally, it still operates on an Excel spreadsheet batch upload system that happens at Payments Canada overnight. So I think that the barrier is, how much do the people in this room care about change? How much do the people around the dinner table care about putting more money back in their pockets, modernizing the system, and removing the sand from the gears of our economy? That is the thing that we have to push for. And I think everyone votes for it every time they make a decision on where they buy. They make a decision every time they get a mortgage. Do we want to help the established system, or do we want to, vote for some change by helping promote some of the challengers? And I think I saw some of the sponsors here are challengers. My first mortgage was with a non-bank, and I think I like that because it's pro-competition. I think we need more competition in Canada, and I think that we're all going to benefit when we see more of an even distribution of kind of the share of the customer's wallet.
Neo Financial has been recognized for its rapid product development, such as adding cashback features to checking accounts, some of the referral pieces you mentioned earlier. How do you see open banking enabling Neo to create more personalized products, like financial products, and how might this inspire mortgage brokers to innovate in their service?
I think the good news is that we're not beholden to the status quo. We're doing the opposite. We're pushing the envelope on developing new technologies that will give us the ability to do things differently. And so, for context, the Canadian banks all operate on the identical tech stack. It's a third-party technology. They don't control it. It's actually another company that controls it. So it's very difficult for them to kind of do things differently. And that's why you kind of see similar pain points between a lot of the banks. On top of that, like, in order for them to change dramatically, it would require tens of billions of dollars of investment to modernize their own systems. And shareholders aren't going to tolerate that level of it. Like no one's going to be okay with them cutting their dividend. So they have that kind of innovator's dilemma. For us though, regardless of whether open banking comes, we're already pushing forward with our own kind of version of it. And that means layering in, and not so much even open banking, but I would say it's more around things like AI. And I'll give you an example. We do some, I think we're one of the largest credit card issuers in Canada right now. And credit cards, a big part of it is credit risk. It's really determining, every single day, millions of transactions, millions of customers, who should we give money to and who we should not. And so we've introduced new AI tools on this that actually are the first of its kind. This is where we're starting to experiment with AI, is on the lending side. And it's basically looking at every single transaction. Imagine the number of people you would need to have in order to monitor every single transaction in real time that's happening across Canada. Millions of transactions a day. Impossible to do. It doesn't scale. But with AI, we literally now have like an AI agent that monitors all these transactions to look for things like fraudulent activity, to look for behavior that will indicate signs of delinquencies. And what that does is it allows us to drive down costs like defaults, charge-offs, things like that. If we drive those down, then you can actually open up who you can lend to, who you can approve. And so we're seeing the early signs of a huge amount of promise, really a revolution on the impact of AI on lending. And on the mortgage front is just rife for it because there's tons of manual process. There's tons of data that needs to be processed. And so for us, I'm excited to see what the application of AI is going to be in terms of speeding up the decision-making process so that we can get to a yes quicker. And then number two is how do we say yes to more people and be confident with who we say yes to?
Yeah, AI is just such a hot topic in every industry right now, especially in ours. And like what other areas is Neo using AI to redefine the banking experience, or what other areas are you considering to leverage AI more?
Yeah, so right now, every engineer has about double the productivity because of AI. So they basically have like coding assistants, code generation. You can automate QA, QC a lot faster. So that basically just allows you to ship code a lot quicker. On the customer side, I think that what my vision is for how AI is going to be used is really going to be kind of phase one is going to be how can we start layering in, and again, we use AI like on customer service, like they call in, it can tell you all the basic things that you would call in to ask an agent for, like your balance, what accounts you have, close an account, open an account. It can do all the basic stuff right now that a human would do. But I think the next step is when you kind of open up the app and you look at it, and you basically give the AI a goal. It could be, hey, AI, can you help me save $1,000 over the next 3 months? And here's the areas that I'm not okay. And you could literally talk into it, and it would actually provide you with a plan to do that, block transactions that you're attempting to make, hold you accountable. And I think where it ends up, so that's kind of phase one, where you kind of like, it's helping you, it's giving you insights. I think like phase 2 or 3 is going to be actually where you turn the keys over to AI, where it can actually be basically a private banker for customers. Right now, private banking, about 0.01% of Canadians have a private banker. It's kind of like a privilege of the elite. And it's pretty cool. Like it's a pretty cool thing to have, but it's just not accessible at all. It doesn't scale. It's too expensive. But you can have that done actually through AI. And so I think the future, what we're going to see within a couple of years is the complete democratization of private banking to virtually everybody, because you're going to be able to have AI do everything that a private banker would do. Hopefully there's no private bankers in here, by the way.
I don't think so. As a serial entrepreneur who's disrupted now both the food industry and the financial services space, what's your vision for Neo Financial's role in challenging Canada's traditional banking giants, over the next decade? And, how can mortgage brokers partner with fintechs like Neo, you know, to drive better outcomes for their clients and just a general better experience for the broker themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't think we've disrupted banking today. I don't think banking is even designed to disrupt. In fact, it's designed to like stay constant. And there's good reasons why it should not be disrupted. I think it should change, it should evolve. But I think we want an evolution, not a revolution. And I think that the promise that we have in Canada is that we're doing a ton of things that banks can't do and won't do, and just aren't interested in doing. There's risks that we take, there's bets that we make that they just will not do for a bunch of different reasons. And I think that the opportunity is actually more in partnership, because there's a lot of things on the technology side that they can't do. Maybe the brain wants to, but the body can't. And on their side, I think the things that the incumbent system is actually really, really good at, it's not the customer side. It's more of the treasury management. It's the compliance side. Our banks are extraordinary at it. They're absolutely brilliant at it. And so and we partner with tons of banks as well. So it's more around, how do we just be honest with the things that we are good at and the things that we're not good at? And how do we actually partner on those things? And we're seeing more and more of that happening. You know, a good example is, like, we'll go out and source capital from a lot of the banks, and they're happy because they don't have to do all the things that they suck at. They don't have to build a whole bunch of technology. They don't have to do a whole bunch of manual process. They can literally leverage their balance sheet without lifting a finger. And then we get to do the things that we're good at, which is managing the customer, providing the wonderful experience, the beautiful app and technology and the UI, UX. That's what we are good at. We should be good at that. We have to be good at that. And then that way we kind of have the best of both worlds, where the customer gets an app that looks and feels like 2025, but then they get the same types of products. They get the better rates than they would normally get. So I think there's a huge amount of promise in just partnering on those things. And then for brokers, I think it's more around, how do you best represent your client? How do you make sure that you're getting deals done? But I think there's also an element of, there's bets that we make on things where we basically say, we want this to exist and we have to give it our vote of confidence. And I think that I'm extremely grateful for the people who have already given us business. I'm extremely grateful for the people in both Skip and Neo, where they could have gone and done something else. They could have just done something the exact same way that they've done it for their entire careers. But for whatever reason, whether it was our underwriting, the relationships that we've built, the technology, they've bet on us. And we have really, really long memories for the people who bet on us before it was obvious. And I think you really need that. And anyone who's building a business knows those people who bet on them early on when it wasn't convenient. And obviously, once you make it and once you've got your own helicopter, everyone's willing to take a risk on you. But it's when you're just grinding and it doesn't feel like everything's working, and then someone steps in and lends you a hand, you really remember those people.
Yeah, great point. I think we'll wrap there. Thank you very much for sharing your incredible journey, wrestling and your competitive mindset to, disrupting the food industry and what you're doing with the bank. I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. I love the tech side of things and just your innovation with open banking and the fact that you're pushing, this forward for all of us. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
thanks, guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for tuning in. If you found value in this show, please subscribe to our channel on your preferred platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Your support is incredibly appreciated. We also welcome your reviews and feedback, which are crucial in helping us deliver outstanding educational content. Feel free to share your thoughts. A 5-star review would be fantastic if you think we earned it. Lastly, a vital announcement about Backpack Buddies, our chosen charity for 2025. This remarkable organization addresses a hidden hunger issue many are unaware of in British Columbia. While school districts provide meals during school hours, numerous children face food scarcity at home, particularly during the weekends. Backpack Buddies steps in to support these vulnerable children ensuring they have easy to prepare, familiar food for weekends. This is achieved through collaborations with schools and an extensive distribution network. Your contribution can make a significant difference. With just $20, you can give a child in need a food bag from Backpack Buddies filled with enough meals and snacks to sustain them over the weekend and more. Once again, thank you for listening, and see you on the next one.